Today we're talking about 4.2, solving equations. We are on page 143 in the textbook. And kind of a review of what we did yesterday, where we were kind of introducing or reminding ourselves what we've learned about solving equations. We talked about two properties of equality. We talked about the addition property of equality and the multiplication property of equality. And we're going to be using those instead of individually in a question, we're going to use them together in questions to solve today. Typically, if there's an opportunity to use both properties, we're going to go with the addition property first and the multiplication property second. It's almost like a little backwards from PEMDAS, or please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, where when we're solving, we're going to do the add or subtract first, multiply or divide second, okay? And I'll show you what I mean here. Let's look at the example 4.2, and this one's letter A. It has 6x plus 3x minus 4 equals 19 plus 4. So we'll do the example first and then we'll go back through and give some steps. First thing I want to do before I try and, solve any equation, I want to kind of clean things up a little bit, put together the things that are alike. I noticed that 6x and 3x both have x's, so I'm going to combine those as like terms. So 6 plus 3 is 9, so I have 9x. I noticed the 4, but I can't put it together with anything because it can only be put together with what's on the side that it's on, right? Over here, I notice I've got 19 plus 4. Neither one of those have x's. We can actually combine those and say that that's going to be 23. So far, just combine like terms on each side separately. Once I've done all that I can do, now I'll begin to use the property of equality to isolate my variable. Okay, I want to get x completely alone. I notice that it's got 9 times x minus 4. Well, I'm going to deal with the multiplication second. I'm going to deal with the add subtract first. Excuse me. All right, so first let's take care of this 4. The opposite of subtracting 4 will be to add 4 because we want to cancel that out. Our property of equality says I can do that as long as I add it on both sides. So now I'm going to bring down what's left. 9x is still here. I notice that minus 4 plus 4 cancels or ends up as 0. And 23 plus 4 is 27. So I'm close. Now I've got just one more step. I've got 9 times x equals 27. The opposite of multiplying is dividing. So I'll divide by 9. That property of equality says I can do that as long as I do it on both sides of the equal sign. So the 9's divide and become 1. 27 divided by 9 equals 3. So I know that my value for x is x equals 3. The directions do encourage you to go ahead and check also. Remember, we're going to check this by putting 3 where each x is in the original problem. So to check it, we'll say instead of 6x, we'll say 6 times 3 plus 3 times 3 minus 4 equals 19 plus 4. So again, the original equation rewritten, but with 3 where the x's were. We've got 3 times 6 is 18. 3 times 3 is 9. So I took care of multiplication, and now, that's supposed to be a plus 4 there. We'll go ahead, we've got 18 plus 9, which is going to give us 27, minus 4 will be 23. And then 19 plus 4, also 23. We got the same answer, so we know that it checks. All right, so notice what we did in this question. The first thing we did, we combined like terms on either side of the equal sign. Then we used our addition property of equality to isolate the variable term. Then we used our multiplication property of equality to completely isolate the variable to solve it. So let's put that down as steps. All right, so our steps for solving all right, number one, we want to combine like terms. On each side of the equal sign. Okay. Once I've combined like terms on each side of the equal sign, next I will use the addition property of equality to, remember we can use it to either add or subtract. To isolate the variable term. And what I mean by isolate the variable term means I want to end up with just the number with the letter, okay? That term that had the letter on it. I want that to be the only term on one of the sides of the equal sign. Once I've got the variable term on one side equal to some number, then step 3, we're going to use the multiplication property of equality all right, and we said that property also covers multiplying and dividing. To multiply or divide, to isolate the variable. So this time I expect to have just the letter, okay? Once I've used multiplication property, it should now say x equals some number or y equals some number. And then step 4, of course, would be to check. And we know we're going to do that by plugging in or substituting that value back into the original problem. All right, let's use the steps and let's look at another one. And this is letter B of that same example. It has x over 8 plus 6 equals 3 minus 1. So step 1 says to combine like terms on each side. So looking over here, I see this term has an x, this one does not. So those are not alike. I can't put them together. But here, 3 and 1, I can put those together. So I'll keep this side the same. 3 minus 1 is 2. Next, I want to use the addition property of equality to get just the variable term isolated, meaning the part that has the letter, I want to get just that. I want to get rid of this. So the plus 6 addition property, I will go ahead and do minus 6 on both sides. So now I've got x over 8, that's gone, equals 6 minus, or 2 minus 6, which is negative 4. Lastly, I want to use that multiplication property of equality to get just the variable. So it's x divided by 8. I know that I'm going to do the opposite. Instead of dividing by 8, we will multiply by 8. But we'll do it on both sides of the equal sign for that property of equality. The 8's would cancel because we know 8's over 1. So I'd be left with x completely isolated now. And then negative 4 times 8, negative 32. And then of course we'll go back in and we'll check by plugging in 32 to the original question. So we've got negative 32 divided by 8 plus 6 equals 3 minus 1. Well, negative 32 divided by 8 would be a negative 4. We still have the plus 6 and the 3 minus 1. Negative 4 plus 6 is a positive 2, and 3 minus 1 is also a positive 2. We would say that it checks. All right, so we're going to be using the steps to solve more equations like this. Some problems you'll need to use both properties, the addition and the multiplication. Some you might only need to use one, okay? The combining like terms, sometimes you have to and sometimes you don't. Like in this case, we didn't have to combine on this side because there weren't like terms. So again, the steps are kind of suggestions. It doesn't mean you're going to do every step for each problem. All right, see you in class.